for 2,922 consecutive days. My morning started at 5:30 a.m. Not for me, but for him. I made his coffee, organized his files, and silently ran the multi-billion-dollar hedge fund he took all the credit for. He called me his wife, but I was just a ghost in his machine. Until I decided to pull the plug. If you believe in getting exactly what you deserve, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon, because you won't want to miss how this ends. My world began at 5:30 a.m., not with the gentle glow of a Manhattan sunrise, but with the cold, silent pulse of an alarm against my wrist. For 2,922 consecutive days. This vibration was my true north, the clappin' in. A private signal in a life that felt increasingly public and yet profoundly unseen. Across the king-sized bed, my husband, Ethan, slept the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who believed the world arranged itself for his convenience. He subscribed to the gospel of a well-rested mind being the key to success. My mind, the one that actually built the machine that funded his success, was apparently an exception. I would slide from beneath the 1,000 thread count sheets, the air from the climate control ghosting across my skin. The floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse displayed a city still draped in indigo and starlight. A breathtaking vista that had long ago lost its magic. It felt less like a view and more like a screensaver for a life I wasn't living. The Calicut marble floor was cold beneath my bare feet as I padded into the kitchen. A cavern of stainless steel and minimalist white cabinets that always felt more like a laboratory than a place for nourishment. Here, in the pre-dawn quiet, I would perform the first algorithm of my day. It wasn't the one that processed terabytes of market data to predict fractional stock movements, the one that had made Vanguard Equity a Wall Street legend. No. This was a more delicate, and in its own way, more vital algorithm. Ethan's coffee. The process was an unwavering ritual, a daily act of precision that bordered on obsession. The single-origin Ethiopian beans were weighed to the 1/10 of a gram, then ground to a micron size I had spent weeks perfecting. The water, sourced from a specific Norwegian spring and filtered twice in-house, it was heated to a non-negotiable 93 degrees Celsius. Any hotter, and a bitter note would emerge. Any cooler, and the subtle citrus and jasmine tones would fail to bloom. The pour-over itself was a slow, meditative spiral, timed by the second, creating a perfect, delicate crema. It was a masterpiece of chemistry and control. The same kind of control that I applied to the code that made him millions. It was a bitter thought, realizing the only application of my genius he seemed to truly appreciate was the one that produced his morning caffeine. At precisely 7:15, he would appear. Ethan didn't just walk into a room, he took possession of it. Tall, impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than my first car. He moved with the frictionless grace of a man who had never been told no. His eyes, a shade of blue that photographers loved, were already fixed on his phone, absorbing the pre-market data like a demigod surveying his domain. He wouldn't greet me, not with words. He would simply stride to the counter, his hand extended, utterly confident that the custom-made ceramic mug, warmed to the perfect temperature, would be waiting for him. It always was. Honey, make sure the Q3 performance reports are printed and bound. I have a board meeting at 10, he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble that belied the command beneath it. The word honey was a casual punctuation, a term of possession, not affection. He took a long sip of the coffee, a brief flicker of satisfaction crossing his perfect features. It was the only acknowledgement I would receive. He turned and left, the faint, expensive scent of his Creed Aventus cologne lingering in the air like a taunt. My first 2 hours of consciousness, a period of intense focus and precision, had been condensed into a silent, 30-second transaction. I was a high-functioning ghost in my own home. The memory of the company's holiday gala from a few months prior surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. I was wearing a suffocatingly elegant gown he'd picked out. A beautiful cage of silk and sequins. We were encircled by the financial elite. The air thick with the murmur of money and the clinking of champagne flutes. An older investor, a bull of a man named Mr. Harrington, had cornered Ethan, his face flushed with profit and expensive scotch. "Ethan, my boy, you've done it again." He'd boomed, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Vanguard's returns are biblical, that algorithm of yours. Oracle. It's not just a black box. It's a miracle. How in God's name does it work?" Ethan flashed his $1,000,000 smile. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me closer. It was a gesture of ownership. "Well, I can't give away all my secrets," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "But the real magic is having an incredible team. And, of course, a very supportive wife, who makes sure my coffee is always hot so I can have those late-night breakthroughs." The men around him roared with laughter. A supportive wife. A coffee maker. "Mr. Harrington gave me a paternal pat on the arm, his eyes crinkling. "A good woman behind every great man." "Eh," I smiled until my jaw ached. "I. The woman with a PhD from MIT. The woman who had single-handedly coded the predictive analytics core of Oracle after the rest of his incredible team had given up, was reduced to a charming domestic anecdote. A beautiful, intelligent accessory." Back in the present day, I fled to my office. My bunker. My cockpit. This was the one space in the $70 million penthouse that was mine. While the rest of the apartment was a sterile gallery of Ethan's ego, my office was a functional, humming nerve center. 3 massive, curved monitors formed a cocoon around my workstation, alive with cascading lines of Python code, real-time market tickers, and complex 3D data visualizations. Here, I wasn't Ethan's wife. I was the master of a universe of my own creation. But even this sanctuary had begun to feel like a gilded cage. I was deep in a diagnostic, stress testing a new volatility hedge module I'd developed, when a sudden thirst pulled me away. I headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I passed Ethan's study, I noticed the heavy oak door was ajar. Just a crack. It was usually kept closed. From within that sliver of space, I heard a voice his assistant, Maria, speaking in a low, conspiratorial tone. Curiosity, a rare and dangerous impulse in this house, made me pause. "No. He's absolutely certain." Maria was whispering into her phone. "He said he wants it to be a big surprise." "Yes. On her birthday. He's booked the private room at Aurelia. He said it's time for a clean break. It's absolutely final." The glass in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Surprise. Birthday. Aurelia. Final. The words were disconnected fragments, but they assembled themselves in my mind with the cold, brutal logic of a computer program compiling. The blood drained from my face. A freezing tide that left my limbs numb. I backed away from the door, my movements stiff and robotic, my own breathing roaring in my ears. There was no screaming, No crying. Such emotional displays were inefficient, and my mind was already shifting, processing, analyzing. I walked back to my office, each step a deliberate, measured act of self-control. I sat down, the leather of my chair cold against my skin. My hands, I noticed with detached curiosity, were perfectly steady as I placed them on the keyboard. Anger could wait. I needed data. My fingers moved with a life of their own, a blur of muscle memory and righteous fury. I didn't need to hack my husband. I had designed the entire digital architecture of his company. I had the master keys to a kingdom he only thought he ruled. A few lines of code, a password I created and he never knew existed. And I was in the server's backend. I searched for recent, encrypted files. A single folder stood out. Project Sunset. My heart began to hammer. A painful, frantic rhythm against my ribs. I opened it. It was a meticulous chronicle of my own erasure. First, the emails. Dozens of them. Back and forth with a shark from the city's most ruthless divorce law firm. They discussed strategies for minimizing my settlement, citing a prenuptial agreement I'd been foolish and in love enough to sign. They talked about how to frame my contribution to the company as supportive rather than foundational. Next, the financials. A web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. A clear, systematic trail of assets being siphoned away from our shared accounts. He was preparing to leave me with nothing but a hollowed-out joint bank account and a designer wardrobe. Then came the document that made me feel true. Physical pain. It was a draft employment contract for a man named Mark Jennings. The position was chief architect. Quantitative stratege. My role. My title. My creation. Being handed over to a stranger. I kept scrolling, driven by a morbid need to see the bottom of his betrayal. And I found it. An email chain with a woman named Chloe Vance, the socialite daughter of a competitor. It was filled with flirty exchanges and plans for the future. The last message, sent from Ethan's phone just the day before, was the kill shot. Soon, it read, after the birthday party, the liability will be handled. We can finally be public. Liability. I read the word over and over. The letters seemed to swim on the screen before snapping back into focus. Sharper and more cruel each time. After 8 years, a PhD, and an algorithm that had generated billions in profit, I was a line item on his balance sheet. A problem to be solved, a liability to be handled. The numbness receded. And in its place, a strange, terrifying calm washed over me. The pain was still there, a white-hot core deep inside. But it was being encased in something else, something hard, and cold, and clear. It was a quiet, glacial rage. A tectonic pressure building beneath the surface. He thought he was closing a chapter. He didn't realize he had just armed his enemy. I looked at the screens in front of me. At the beautiful, lethal elegance of the Oracle code. My code. He had built his empire on my intellect. And in his arrogance, he had forgotten that the architect of a system is also the master of its demolition. As if on cue, a cheerful ping announced a new email in my inbox. My eyes flicked to the notification. It was from the concierge at Aurelia. The subject line, confirmation private booking for Ethan. I clicked it open. The details of the reservation filled the screen. A private dining room for 40 of our closest friends on the evening of my 32nd birthday. At the bottom of the confirmation was the note the concierge had received from Ethan's office. Occasion surprise party for Bonnie. A very special occasion. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It felt alien, like a muscle I hadn't used in years. Oh, it would be a surprise. All right. He had built the stage, sent out the invitations, and planned the public execution. He just didn't realize I was about to rewrite the entire play. The world outside the window continued its ceaseless, glittering dance. But inside my office, time had frozen. I sat motionless, the email from Aurelia burning a cold, perfect image onto my retinas. The cheerful, corporate font confirming the stage for my public execution. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It felt alien, like a muscle I hadn't used in years. Oh, it would be a surprise. All right. He had built the stage, sent out the invitations, and planned the public execution. He just didn't realize I was the one who was about to direct the final act. That night, sleep was an irrelevant concept. While Ethan breathed the deep, even breaths of the self-righteous in our shared bed, I was in my office, the glow of my monitors painting the room in shades of blue and white. The pain was still there, a white-hot singularity in my chest, but it was no longer a debilitating force. Pain, I was discovering, is a powerful catalyst. It can be transmuted. That night, I began the alchemy of turning 8 years of quiet agony into the fuel for a meticulous, cold-blooded war. I didn't start with code. I started with a name. I opened a new, encrypted document, the cursor blinking patiently in the vast emptiness. I typed a single word, Nemesis, the Greek goddess of retribution, who doled out punishment for arrogance and hubris. It felt fitting. This wouldn't be a messy, emotional outburst. It would be a divine, mathematical reckoning. For hours, I didn't write a single line of code. Instead, I drew a map. On a digital whiteboard, I created a flowchart, a symphony of collapse. Each box and arrow was a step à l'égal manœuvre, a financial trigger, all leading to one singular point in time, my 32nd birthday. The next morning, as the real sun rose, I performed my usual algorithm. I made Ethan's coffee with the same unwavering precision, the aroma of the Ethiopian beans filling the sterile kitchen. He took it from me with his usual distracted air, his mind already at the office. He didn't notice the new, unnerving stillness in my eyes, or the fact that my smile didn't quite reach them. While he was showering, I sat at my laptop at the kitchen island. With a few clicks and a wire transfer to a registered agent service, Nemesis Framework LLC was officially incorporated in the state of Delaware. It was a ghost, a legal entity with no history and no public face, and it belonged entirely to me. The act was so quiet, so mundane, yet it felt like my first true act of rebellion. I was forging my own armor in the heart of my enemy's citadel. My days took on a new, secret rhythm. By day, I was the perfect, invisible wife, managing the household, attending the charity luncheons he insisted upon, and ensuring the continued, flawless operation of Oracle. But by night, I was a saboteur. My first task was the deconstruction of my own masterpiece. To an outsider, it would look like I was destroying it. But I wasn't. Imagine Oracle is a Formula One racing car, a perfect synthesis of power and design. I wasn't smashing it with a sledgehammer. I was carefully unbolting the engine, the transmission, the chassis, the onboard computer, every critical component, and legally redefining each one as a standalone piece of intellectual property. Each piece was then licensed, through a series of complex agreements, to my new, anonymous LLC. I was reclaiming my creation, piece by painstaking piece. It felt like I was gathering the scattered parts of my own soul. With the components legally separated, the next step was to build the trap. I spent nearly a week drafting the new licensing agreements. They were masterpieces of obfuscation, buried in hundreds of pages of the most mind-numbing technical and legal jargon imaginable. I larded them with clauses on data compliance, third-party software integration, and server maintenance protocols. And hidden deep within that dense forest of text, like a sliver of diamond-edged glass inside a loaf of bread, were the kill clauses. Clauses that gave Nemesis Framework LLC the unilateral right to terminate the licensing agreement with Vanguard Equity for any reason, with immediate effect. Clauses that transferred the core intellectual property patents from a company asset to a licensed, third-party technology. I mimicked the exact formatting and typography of our previous legitimate service agreements, ensuring they would look utterly routine. About a week before the party, the perfect opportunity arose. Ethan came home late, buzzing with the electric energy of a massive victory. He'd just closed a deal with a Japanese pension fund, a 9-figure investment. He poured 2 glasses of celebratory whiskey, handing one to me. "To us? Honey," he said, his eyes alight. Oracle did it again. It sniffed out a currency fluctuation the rest of the market completely missed. The Japanese were blown away. "That's wonderful, Ethan," I said, my voice a smooth, calm sea above the raging storm within. I took a small sip of the whiskey, its burn grounding me. I let him bask in his stolen glory for a few more minutes before I made my move. "That reminds me," I said, my tone casual. "I've completed the quarterly software updates and audits. There are a few routine service agreements that need your signature to keep everything compliant." I retrieved the thick stack of documents from my office. I placed them on the marble coffee table, along with his favorite Mont Blanc pen. He glanced at the top page, a dense wall of text, and scoffed. "God, I hate this stuff. You know I don't read this jargon." "Bonnie, that's what I have you for," he smirked, as if paying me a compliment. "Just show me where to sign." My heart began to pound. A heavy, deliberate drumbeat. Not of fear, but of adrenaline. I calmly flipped through the pages, pointing to the signature lines at the bottom of each section. With a flourish, he scrawled his arrogant, looping signature on each one. The scratch of the pen on the thick paper was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. With each stroke, he was signing away his kingdom. He was handing me the sword, believing he was asking me to polish it. When he was done, he pushed the stack back toward me without a second thought and went to refill his glass. The empire was now mine. The next day, I made a call. It was to Ethan's parents. My voice was a careful construction of warmth and daughterly concern. I asked about their health, their garden, and then, as if the thought had just occurred to me, I brought up their finances. I knew from Ethan that they had a substantial mortgage on their sprawling estate in the Hamptons, a $15 million loan held by a private bank. I was just looking at the interest rates, I said, weaving a web of financial jargon I knew they wouldn't understand but would trust implicitly. "I think you're overpaying. I could help you refinance it through a different vehicle. Lock in a much better rate. It's the least I can do for you." They were, of course, delighted. They had always treated me as a kind of useful, free financial advisor. I spent the next 2 days setting it up. I found a lender who was happy to refinance the loan, especially with my subtle guarantee of Vanguard's backing, and I worked with their lawyers to draft the terms and buried deep in the miscellaneous section. Section 9, subsection C, was a standard-looking but lethal acceleration clause. It stated that the entire loan balance of $15 million would become immediately due and payable upon a material change in familial status of their son, Ethan. The definition of such a change included, among other things, the initiation of divorce proceedings. To complete the daisy chain, I made sure the trust funds of Ethan's younger sister, which his parents managed, were listed as secondary collateral against the loan. If the loan defaulted, the trusts would be frozen instantly. With all the pieces in place, I returned to my digital whiteboard. I looked at the completed flowchart. The network of companies and contracts and clauses. It was no longer just a plan, it was a machine. A perfect, beautiful, ruthless machine designed to deliver justice. It was my new masterpiece. That evening, Ethan was in a particularly self-satisfied mood. He was reviewing the guest list for the party, a smug smile on his face. "Oh," he said, tapping a name on his tablet. "I forgot to tell you. I invited Mark Jennings to your birthday party. I think it's time he started meeting the team. You know, unofficially." I looked up from my book, my expression placid. Mark Jennings, the man designated to take my place. The gall of him was breathtaking. He wasn't just planning to replace a gear in the machine, he was showing off the new gear to the old one before tossing it in the trash. The fresh stab of pain was sharp, but it was useful. It solidified my resolve into something as hard and as clear as a diamond. "That's a great idea." "Honey," I said, my voice even. "I'd love to meet him." A few days before the party, a velvet blue box from Cartier arrived by messenger. I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a diamond necklace, a river of blindingly perfect stones. It must have cost a fortune. Attached was a small, cream-colored card, with Ethan's handwriting in black ink. "To the most wonderful wife." It read, "Hope you enjoy your parting gift." He was mocking me. Openly. Cruelly. With a final, extravagant gesture of his power. He thought this was the end of the story. I picked up the necklace. It was cold and heavy against my skin. A beautiful, glittering snake. I clasped it around my neck and looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my monitor. A strange, chilling smile met my gaze. The gift wasn't for me to keep. It was for me to wear on the night I took everything from him. "Oh, you'll enjoy your gift too, Ethan," I thought, the diamonds flashing like ice in the low light. "I guarantee it." The evening of my 32nd birthday arrived not with a sense of dread, but with a preternatural calm. The storm I had been brewing internally had finally settled into a quiet, focused eye. There was no more rage, no more pain. There was only the plan, a beautiful and intricate machine of my own design, waiting for me to press the start button. I prepared for the evening like a general preparing for a decisive battle. My uniform was a simple, sleeveless black dress, elegant in its severity. It was a stark canvas. My armor was the Cartier necklace Ethan had given me. The river of diamonds, cold and heavy against my skin. I looked at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The woman looking back was someone I barely recognized. And yet, she felt more like myself than I had in years. The soft, accommodating edges had been sharpened into something clear and defined. The diamonds glittered under the recessed lighting. A beautiful, glittering snake I had tamed. It was the spoils of a war he didn't even know he had already lost. In my hand, I held a small, black alligator clutch. It contained my phone, a single key, and a slim, black envelope. The kill switch. When I walked into the living room, Ethan was pouring himself a drink. He turned, and for a moment, his practiced smile faltered. He saw the dress, the necklace, the unnerving calm in my eyes, and he looked momentarily impressed. And perhaps a little unnerved. "Wow," he said, his voice a low purr. "You look absolutely stunning, Bonnie." "Thank you, Ethan," I replied, my voice even and cool. "You should only give gifts you're prepared to see worn." The black car I had arranged was waiting downstairs. The ride to Aurelia was quiet. He talked animatedly about the markets, about his plans for a new European expansion. He was a man on top of the world, sketching out blueprints for a future he believed was his for the taking. I listened, nodding occasionally, my mind 1,000 miles away, running final diagnostics on the sequence of events I was about to unleash. The machine was ready. Aurelia was everything I expected it to be, a cathedral of wealth and taste. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and towering arrangements of white lilies. A low, sophisticated hum of conversation filled the vast, gold-leafed space. The staff moved with silent, obsequious efficiency. This was Ethan's natural habitat, a world built on surfaces and illusions. A gilded cage he had locked me in. Tonight, I was going to burn it to the ground. He placed a proprietary hand on my back, guiding me toward the private dining room. "Everyone's waiting," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. The gesture, once a source of quiet comfort, now felt like the touch of a spider. The room was filled with them 40 of our closest friends, a collection of hedge fund managers, investment bankers, socialites, and their impeccably dressed spouses. They all turned as we entered. A chorus of happy birthday. Bonnie rising to greet me. I smiled. A serene, placid expression I had perfected over years of practice. I moved through the room, accepting air kisses and insincere compliments, my eyes scanning the crowd. I saw them all so clearly now, the sycophants, the rivals pretending to be allies, the women who looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. And then I saw him, Mark Jennings. He was standing near the bar, looking handsome and confident in that uniquely oblivious way of privileged men. Ethan made the introduction with a theatrical flourish. "Bonnie, I'd like you to meet Mark Jennings. Mark is a rising star over at Goldman. But I've been trying to convince him to come play for the winning team," Ethan said with a wink. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Bonnie," Mark said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Ethan speaks so highly of you." "Does he?" I replied, my voice soft. I let my eyes hold his for a fraction of a second too long, my calm smile never wavering. "He's a very good salesman." I saw a flicker of confusion in his eyes before I turned away, leaving him standing there. The dinner was an agonizingly perfect performance. Course after course of exquisite food arrived and was cleared away. The wine flowed freely. I played my part, the gracious and appreciative birthday girl. While underneath the table, my fingers lightly tapped out a prime number sequence on the cool metal of my clutch. 3, 5, 7, 11. The countdown had begun. Finally, as the dessert plates were being set, Ethan stood up. He tapped a fork gently against his crystal wine glass. The room fell into an expectant hush. This was it. The main event. "If I could have everyone's attention," he began, his voice resonating with practiced charisma, "I'd like to propose a toast." He raised his glass, his eyes sweeping the room before landing on me. "To my beautiful wife, Bonnie. Today, she turns 32. And I have never been more proud of the woman she is." I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. The room was filled with soft, appreciative murmurs. "For 8 years," he continued, "she has been my rock. Her quiet strength and unwavering support have been the foundation upon which I've built everything. She has created a perfect home, a perfect life for us, and has done it all with a grace that still takes my breath away." He was painting a masterpiece of condescension. He praised my intuition, my emotional intelligence, all the soft, feminine virtues that were a safe distance from the hard, masculine world of numbers and code where the real power lay. My internal monologue was a running, venomous commentary, dissecting the hypocrisy of every syllable. "But life is about growth," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious, more profound. "It's about evolution. And as we grow, we sometimes find ourselves at a crossroads. We realize that to move forward into a new chapter, we have to be brave enough to make difficult decisions." He paused for dramatic effect. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. He was about to deliver the killing blow, to announce our divorce and cast me as the sad, gentle woman being left behind for the sake of his inevitable, glorious ascent. As the word decisions hung in the air, my hand moved. It was a single, unhurried, deliberate motion. I reached into my clutch and placed the slim, black envelope on the pristine white linen of the tablecloth, directly in front of his dessert plate. The gesture was so small, yet it shattered the theatrical tension of the moment. A few people at our table noticed, their eyes flicking from him to the stark black rectangle. Ethan's practiced speech faltered. A line of confusion appeared between his perfect eyebrows. "What's this?" he asked, his voice losing some of its confident timbre. I looked directly at him, my voice clear and steady, audible to everyone at our table. "Open it, Ethan. It's my birthday gift to you." A tense, awkward silence fell over our section of the room. He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Then, with a flicker of annoyance, he snatched it up and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cardstock. On it was a list. He stared at it, his face a mask of confusion. "What is this, a joke?" I leaned forward slightly. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the calm, dispassionate clarity of a professor explaining a law of physics. "It's a sequence of events. In approximately 7 minutes, a series of pre-programmed, automated orders will be executed." His eyes flicked from the paper back to my face, a dawning horror in their depths. "First," I continued, my voice unwavering, "a cascade of short-sell orders against Vanguard Equity, placed through a variety of anonymous international brokers, will trigger a high-frequency trading alert, flagging the company for market manipulation. Second, the algorithm you call Oracle, which is the intellectual property of a private company called Nemesis Framework LLC, will execute a termination for cause clause, effective immediately, revoking Vanguard's license to operate. The heart of your company will stop beating, A gasp went around the table. Ethan's face had gone pale. "Third," I said, pressing on. "The $15 million loan on your parents' Southampton estate, which I so kindly helped them refinance, contains an acceleration clause that is triggered by this event. The full balance is now due. Their assets, including your sister's trust funds which were listed as collateral, are now frozen. And finally, a comprehensive file detailing your history of intellectual property theft and fraudulent misrepresentation to investors has just been delivered electronically to the Enforcement Division of the SEC." I sat back in my chair. "I believe that covers everything." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The charismatic CEO was gone, replaced by a stunned, horrified man. I calmly folded my napkin and placed it on the table. I stood up, my movements fluid and unhurried. I looked down at him one last time. "Explain to your friends," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "why your entire empire will cease to exist before dessert is served." I turned my back on him. I turned my back on all of them. I walked out of the private dining room, the weight of 40 shocked stares on my back. I didn't look back. As the heavy wooden doors swung shut behind me, I heard the first confused murmurs erupt into panicked noise. And then, a sound more satisfying than any applause, the distinct, cascading pings of phone after phone receiving urgent financial news alerts. The chaos had begun. A black car, one I had booked under a new name, was waiting for me at the curb. The driver opened the door, and I slid inside, the cool leather a comfort against my skin. As we pulled away from the curb, I could see the frantic, flickering lights of cell phone screens through the restaurant's large windows. The drive across the Williamsburg Bridge was quiet. I watched the glittering skyline of Manhattan, the monuments to wealth and power, recede in the rearview mirror. It was no longer my world. I arrived at a quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn, at a brownstone I had purchased 2 weeks ago with my own money. The apartment was mostly empty, containing only a chair, a table, and my laptop. It was perfect. I sat down and opened the machine. I didn't need to check the company servers. The news was already public. The Bloomberg terminal was a sea of red. At the top of the screen was the ticker for Vanguard Equity. VECT. Next to it, in bold, capital letters, were the words, "Trading halted." My own phone, a new, untraceable burner, buzzed on the table. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was just 5 words. "I just kit. You're my hero." It was from Maria. A real, genuine smile touched my lips. The machine had worked perfectly. A real, genuine smile touched my lips. The machine had worked perfectly. For a long moment, I just sat there in the near-empty room, the blue glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The chaos I had unleashed felt a world away, a distant storm I was watching from a secure bunker. The phone buzzed again, and again, and again. A flood of texts from people at the party. A chaotic mix of shock, confusion, and a few, surprisingly, of thinly veiled admiration. I ignored them all. The only message that mattered was the one from Maria. It was a sign that I hadn't just destroyed something. I had, perhaps, created a space for something new. In the days that followed, I became a spectator to the demolition I had engineered. My quiet Brooklyn brownstone became my command center, and the news was my satellite feed. The fallout was swift. brutal, and more public than I could have ever imagined. It was a montage of a life, an empire, coming undone. I'd watch the financial news channels, a cup of my own perfectly made coffee in hand, as talking heads tried to make sense of the unprecedented, instantaneous collapse of Vanguard Equity. They called it a black swan event, a digital blitzkrieg. They couldn't comprehend that the architect of the fortress was also the one who held the demolition codes. I saw news footage of Ethan's parents, their faces ashen and bewildered, as moving trucks were parked outside their magnificent Southampton estate. The acceleration clause had been mercilessly executed. Their legacy, their status, all of it was being packed into boxes because of their son's hubris. I felt a pang of something, not kite guilt, but a somber acknowledgement of the collateral damage. They had been complicit in their son's narrative. I'm happy to benefit from a genius they never bothered to see. And now they were part of the correction. I saw a brief, grainy clip of Chloe Vance, cornered by paparazzi outside a Fifth Avenue boutique. Her face, usually a mask of bored glamour, was a mess of panic. "No comment, I have no comment," she shrieked, shielding her face as she scrambled into a waiting car. Her fairy tale had ended before it had even begun. She was a footnote in a story she thought she was the star of. And then there was Ethan. He was everywhere and nowhere. His face was plastered across every news site. A portrait of a fallen titan. The SEC investigation was swift and aggressive. The file I had sent them was a perfect roadmap of his crimes. And with Oracle's code now under my control, there was an irrefutable digital trail of his fraud. Stripped of my algorithm, he had nothing left but his charm. And for the first time in his life, it wasn't enough. About a week after the party, a loud, insistent banging on my front door jolted me from my work. I knew, instinctively, who it was. I looked through the peephole. There he stood on my quiet, tree-lined street. A ghost from a former life. He was a wreck. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. And his face was pale and unshaven. The invincible titan of Wall Street was gone. In his place was a desperate, broken man. I opened the door, but stood in the doorway, blocking his entry. He looked at me, his eyes wild with a cocktail of rage and pleading. "Bonnie," he gasped, his voice raspy. How could you do this to me? To us?" "There is no us, Ethan," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You made that clear." "I loved you," he cried, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. "Everything I did for us, for our future." He tried to step forward, to reach for me, but I didn't move. "No," I said, the word a solid wall between us. "Everything you did for your ego. You built an empire on my back and then decided I was weighing you down. You didn't just want to divorce me, you wanted to erase me. You wanted to leave me with nothing." Tears started to stream down his face. The pathetic, self-pitying tears of a narcissist who has lost his audience. He fell to his knees on my doorstep. A spectacle of ruin. "Please, Bonnie," he begged. "We can fix this. I'll tell them it was all you. I'll give you all the credit. Just give it back. Give me my company back." And there it was. The final, damning admission. He still saw it as his. He still saw me as a tool. An asset that could be negotiated with. The last embers of any lingering pity I might have felt for him died in that moment. I looked down at the man I had once loved. the man I had dedicated 8 years of my life to, and I felt nothing but a profound, empty peace. I had felt more emotion for the fictional characters in the books I read. I gave you everything. Ethan, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of finality. I gave you my mind, my time, my loyalty. You took it all. And you called it yours. This isn't revenge. This is a balancing of the books. A market correction. An outcome you should have predicted if you were half as smart as you pretended to be. I stepped back and slowly, deliberately, closed the heavy oak door. I didn't slam it. I simply shut it. The solid click of the lock echoing in the sudden silence. I leaned my back against the door, listening to his ragged, desperate sobs on the other side. Then, after a few minutes, there was only the sound of his retreating footsteps, the sound of a ghost fading away forever. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I felt completely and utterly free. 6 months later, the view from my window was different. I was no longer looking at a quiet Brooklyn street, but out across the vast, glittering expanse of the Hudson River from the 30th floor of a new glass tower in Jersey City. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, a phoenix taking flight. This was the headquarters of Phoenix Analytics, my company. The office was the antithesis of Vanguard's cold, minimalist mausoleum. It was open, filled with light, whiteboards covered in complex equations, and the low, energetic hum of brilliant minds at work. I hadn't hired a team based on Ivy League pedigrees or who they knew. I had sought out the ones who, like me, had been overlooked. My head of data science was a woman who had left a top-tier firm after being repeatedly passed over for promotion in favor of less qualified men. My lead programmer was a young mother who had been told she couldn't handle the demands of the industry. Together, we were a team of ghosts who had decided to become titans. We had just landed our first major contract, a multi-million-dollar deal to manage the portfolio of a progressive European investment fund. We had won it in a head-to-head competition against a massive, established firm. Our algorithm, a complete redesign built upon the core principles of Oracle but far more advanced and ethical, had outperformed theirs by a staggering margin. The victory was sweet. Not because we had beaten a competitor, but because we had proven our worth on our own terms. The ultimate validation came a few weeks later. It arrived in the form of a request for a cover story from Forbes magazine. The issue hit the stands the following month. The cover was a simple, powerful portrait of me, looking directly at the camera, my expression calm and confident. The headline, in bold, white letters, read, "The Woman Who Built and Burned, a Wall Street Empire in One Night." In the article, I told my story, not the whole, messy truth, but enough of it. I talked about the importance of intellectual property, about the quiet contributions so often made by women that are absorbed into the achievements of men, and I used the platform to announce my next project, the Nemesis Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier legal aid to women in tech and finance fighting to reclaim ownership of their stolen intellectual work. That evening, I went home to my brownstone, which was no longer empty but filled with comfortable furniture, books, and art that I loved. In my safe, I still had the Cartier necklace, the parting gift. For months, I hadn't known what to do with it. Selling it felt wrong. Keeping it felt like holding on to a piece of the poison. Now, I knew. The next day, I took it to a master jeweler. I didn't sell it. I had him painstakingly remove every single diamond from its platinum setting. The loose stones, a small mountain of cold, hard fire, which were appraised and certified. They became the headline donation for the Nemesis Foundation's inaugural fundraising auction, a symbol of my humiliation, of his arrogant mockery, was being transformed into the seed money to fund justice for dozens of other women. The final scene of my old life played out not in a courtroom or an office, but in the quiet of my own home. I stood by the window of my new office a few weeks later, watching the last sliver of the sun dip below the horizon. The city lights were beginning to glitter across the water, a galaxy of human ambition. For so long, I had been a ghost in that world, the invisible force behind a powerful man. Now, I was a force of my own. I had not just reclaimed my work, I had reclaimed my name, my story, my life. I turned away from the window and walked to the small, high-end coffee bar I had installed in a corner of the office. I ground the beans, heated the water, and performed the familiar, precise ritual. The rich, fragrant aroma filled the quiet space. I poured the dark liquid into a simple ceramic mug. I took a sip. It was perfect. This time, it was made just for me.